Change is sweeping through China's factories, where workers' demands are growing as they realize their value to employers and the Chinese economy. Unrest, suicides and strikes have forced some companies to increase workers' wages and benefits. The unrest has driven home a looming reality. The supply of young Chinese workers has peaked and is rapidly dropping thanks to stringent family planning policies. And today's young workers are less willing to toil long hours for dismal wages. I'm Shakun Tilasantharan. On this edition of 101 East, we look at the changing face of China's labour force. Here's more from Steve Nettleton.
As the turbines of China's great factories spin off the cobwebs of the world economic crisis, with orders for low-cost goods surging to new highs, an awakening is taking place. The hundreds of millions of workers that have quietly powered China's export assembly line for decades are finding their voice.
We are not asking for too much, just that the working hours abide by the labor law and the food should be suitable for human beings.
A young, bold workforce is finding new leverage, in part because their once seemingly endless ranks are starting to dwindle.
China's economy has been on a fast upward trajectory for the past 20 or 30 years, but actually there is not enough labor to support this economic growth.
And their rising self-confidence creates a new burden for employers.
On one hand, the raw material is more expensive. On the other, the workers are asking for higher pay.
Workers are spoiled now. Their eagerness to learn and work hard is lower than those born in the 60s and 70s.
For generations, Chinese workers have endured low wages and tough conditions, as long as they could provide for their families. But now, emboldened by new labor laws and a strong economy, more workers are taking a stand to demand higher salaries and better benefits. About 2,000 workers at a Honda plant in southern Guangdong province walked off the production line in May in protest of low wages. The stoppage ended after management agreed to a pay raise, but it inspired strikes in dozens of other factories across China. As the Honda shutdown was nearing its end, one worker, who wished not to be identified, sensed a movement was underway.
Strikes are happening in other places as well. It is nationwide. All the workers are paying great attention to the development of the strike here. The strike has become an example.
The unrest comes as a new wave of workers in their 20s takes their turn to fill factory payrolls. They are the first generation born under China's strict family planning policies that sought to limit most parents to having only one child. The policy significantly reduced birth rates, especially in rural areas, the source from which the bulk of China's floating labor population comes.
Labor-intensive industries still make up the majority of China's economy, so economic prosperity is based on labor. The rapid increase in exports means the market needs even more workers, but since 2004, the supply of labor, especially cheap labor from rural areas, has been going down.
Liu Kaiming is the director of a labor advocacy organization in Shenzhen, which monitors working conditions and seeks to improve workers' rights.
China is now facing a dilemma. On one hand, many college graduates cannot secure a job because there are not enough high-level positions for them. On the other, labor-intensive industries are short of labor.
At job fairs like this one in Guangzhou, openings far outnumber applicants. Where 2 years ago, crowds of unemployed workers scrambled for any position, job candidates now have the luxury of choice.
It's more competitive. Pretty much everyone can get a job that they want. There are more factories and companies.
现在目前就是说，还有一些厂家啊，他就言行不一致，就是说。
There are many opportunities to get a job, but there is a lot of inconsistency between what is promised and what many companies or factories do. Like these companies that come to this job market today, what they say is fairly attractive, but once you get into the factory, things are not the same as what they claim to offer.
Recruiters here are finding they must compete not only with local factories, but with new industrial zones elsewhere in China that are drawing away a shrinking labor pool.
In the old days, you didn't need to come to a job market to recruit. We hardly ever participated at job fairs like this because there were many workers coming down to the south. They even came to our doors. As soon as we posted a job notice, loads of people lined up for it.
Now, many managers take their notices to the streets, advertising vacancies in industrial neighborhoods populated by migrant workers. While workers here have an abundance of prospective employers, trust and goodwill are in short supply.
A rift is growing between companies and an increasingly assertive workforce. Workers say that while wages have risen, they are not keeping pace with China's expanding economy. Factories accustomed to cheap labor are reluctant to significantly increase wages and benefits.
Although now I get paid better, the living cost is higher too, so it doesn't make a big difference. To be honest, the salary is even lower if you take the increased living expenses into consideration.
Workers quit because they can hardly make any money. Some bosses have to hire 10 workers one day and find another 10 the day immediately after, since the first 10 workers ran away when they found out their boss doesn't pay them on time. We should demand our legal rights. Everyone has his or her value. If you hire people to work for you, you should pay them according to the value they have contributed.
It's not that all the bosses in China are not trustworthy. Actually, it is the workers who make the boss vulnerable. If they don't work well, the boss goes bankrupt and cannot pay the salaries. So then the workers will feel angry with these bosses. Both sides have contributed to the issue.
For many factory managers, the squeeze also comes from retailers and consumers half a world away. Jamal Nasser of Britain runs a clothing export business in Guangzhou. He must strike a balance between rising worker expectations and his clients in Europe, who are unlikely to pay more to cover growing labor costs.
So when they purchase a garment from the third world or China or India, they're expecting to get so low bottom price. And when the machinists or when the staff, they start asking for more money, now I can't get more money out of my customers to be able to give to my workers. So it's quite a big battle and does affect quite a lot, because there is even some cases really I broke even. I didn't even make a single penny.
Workers born in the 1960s, like Zheng Jianbo, are used to putting up with hardship, what the Chinese call eating bitterness.
These days, bosses treat workers like kings, because there are fewer workers now. Before, workers from other provinces worked very hard. Even if the boss asked them to leave, they wouldn't leave. If the work was reasonable, they worked really hard.
Zheng left his hometown in Guangdong province 11 years ago when he was already in his 30s, moving from factory to factory in Guangzhou. He and his wife, Wang Ruihuan, now both work for Nasser's clothing company.
I first started working here because of our living conditions. We were poor. Nothing went well back home. So we came out to work. At first, I only made $45 per month. It was very low, but it was better than working in my hometown.
Salaries have risen, but so have costs. The couple just makes enough to pay for their son's tuition fees, rent, and living expenses. They plan to keep working only a few more years until their son is old enough to support himself. They feel they have little in common with the work ethic of younger workers.
People are different from generation to generation. Before, we had to endure hardship. People now talk about enjoyment and dining out. Before, it was about having adequate clothing and food. Now, it is about being fairly prosperous and secure.
Coming up after the break, Chinese workers discover that finding a job is the easy part. Putting up with it is a different challenge.
It's not convenient to come out. This is not good. We don't have much freedom now.
Nobody will help us. Nobody cares about us.
Welcome back to 101 East. This week we're looking at the changes sweeping across China's labour force, where workers are demanding more from their employers. Here's more from Steve Nettleton.
A new generation of migrant workers is streaming into China's manufacturing center of Guangdong. They are younger, better educated, and have bigger dreams than their predecessors. Unlike before, they are not here just to feed their families. They want to enjoy their share of China's economic miracle.
Nearly 250 million migrant laborers have formed the backbone of China's development machine. But while jobs are plentiful, workers still face many difficulties. Lengthy separation from family, cramped living conditions, and policies that make many feel excluded from the urban community they've adopted. Liu Wenxiong and Hu Lihua came to Guangzhou to make a living in the garment industry. They met on the job and were married 4 years ago. Finding profitable work has not been a problem.
In the past, it was the bosses that were looking for tailors. They went to our hometowns to find workers, recommended by some relatives and friends.
Now for all the factories, it is hard for them to recruit tailors like us. We now can choose the factory. Every clothes factory needs the tailors, and if they don't provide a good salary, we just leave.
But for all its economic opportunity, Guangzhou has never felt much like a home.
I don't think I will stay working in Guangzhou for all my life, because our children will go to the schools in our hometown. We just want to make some money with which we can go back to run a small business. Certainly we won't do migrant work for all our lives. Guangdong is a place only good for making a fortune, and it's not a nice and suitable place for living.
Wherever migrants like Liu and Hu go, they will always be officially regarded as temporary residents and ineligible for certain public services. That's because, according to the government, they are still citizens of their hometown in Hubei province. China has long used a household registration permit, known as the hukou, to control the population flow from the countryside to the cities.
One social status is closely combined with their hukou. One with a rural hukou is destined to be a farmer. Although they can come to the cities, they are only allowed to go to a place to work. They don't have the right of migration. All their political rights and social rights as a citizen are still preserved at their residence where their hukou is held. The policy makes migrant workers rootless and always on the go.
As non-residents, they do not qualify for subsidized housing, free secondary education for their children, or public health insurance programs.
Locals have advantages because they have houses and some of them have more than one, so they can live on rent and not do any work. But migrant workers have to be able to afford a house on their own and also cover daily spending.
The hukou policy is a system of social exclusion, which makes it impossible for migrant workers to enjoy the advantages of economic development like others who live in big cities. Although more people have realized the disadvantage of this policy, the country has not abolished it because, to a great extent, it helps ensure China's edge of abundant, cheap labor.
In some parts of China, the hukou system is going through a change. The Yangtze River metropolis of Chongqing is offering to grant millions of workers from the countryside a city hukou. Chongqing is more than a single city. It is a mountainous chunk of central China the size of Austria, populated by more than 33 million people, 20 million of them farmers. According to the new policy, farmers who live in the urban center for 5 years or in rural areas for 3 can apply for a city hukou. But many rural residents are skeptical of the plan, as they must sell the rights to their farmland to take up the offer. They say it's unclear how much they would receive and how they'd then make a living in the city. Ms. Zhang works as a waitress at a small restaurant in downtown Chongqing. She comes from a village outside the urban center. She is reluctant to apply for a city hukou for fear it would mean losing her rural home.
Housing and living costs in the city will be our burden. Residence is a primary problem because the housing price in Chongqing is really high and most of us can't afford it. But if the living fee and housing problem can be solved, most of us would like to transfer our hukou to the city. After all, the city has convenient facilities and more chances to make money.
Travel agent Zhang Qian commutes 2 hours every day to downtown Chongqing from her home in the mountains across the river. She has worked in factories in Guangdong and eastern Jiangsu province, but now prefers to stay in her hometown. Her parents have switched to an urban hukou, but she is in no rush to change hers.
I
feel for the government, the policy of changing the rural resident status to urban resident status is a good way for the old people who have lost work. Since in the rural areas, if they don't work, they need to rely on their children for life expenses. As for young people like us, we would like to work in factories or companies. The employers will pay their part of our social welfare and pensions. So for us, there are few differences.
Swelling populations of floating workers have led other major cities to try new tactics in managing the flow. In Beijing, where more than 7 million of the city's 19 million residents are migrant laborers, walls are rising around some low-income neighborhoods. An ID card is now required to enter Dashengzhuang, a community mostly inhabited by migrant workers in the capital's southern suburbs. Gates bar the entrance, while security guards and surveillance cameras keep watch on comings and goings. Authorities say the measures are needed to protect the neighborhood from rising crime, a sentiment shared by some locals.
I think it's good for our security. It's not safe to allow strangers to get in.
I prefer living under control.
For others, though, the extra security seems like another way to keep migrants isolated and marginalized.
It's not convenient to come out. This is not good. We don't have much freedom now. For example, I cannot easily get out to buy some food if I'm hungry at night.
Most villagers are migrant workers. They might not get used to this management system at the beginning, but I think eventually they will get used to it.
Adapting to hardship has proven a defining trait of China's manufacturing workers, who still toil away for an average of only 80 US cents an hour. They are driven to endure out of necessity.
We have to stand on our own. To afford a home, you have to work on your own. Nobody will help us. Nobody cares about us. We will always work more if we can.
But as the size of China's migrant workforce diminishes, so too may their willingness to put up with difficulties and low pay.
There were 19,000 cases of labor conflicts in 1995, while in 2009, the number topped 800,000. It increased quite fast. I believe there will be more new generation workers who support the establishment of a workers' union, which can really speak for their interests. This may even influence the country's political structure in the future.
Chinese labor is very cheap. Foreign workers live a very comfortable life, only working 8 hours a day. Our living conditions are bad too. I hope my living conditions can improve. Of course, I hope food, clothes, and housing can all become better.
I hope my kids don't have to suffer like us. I hope they will be better than us. My son earns very little money now, but we still ask him to endure. He needs to work hard. There's no other way.
But today's new generation of workers will be demanding more for their hard labor, knowing they are the driving force behind China's export economy.
That's all the time we have for this edition of 101 East. You can follow the program on our website, podcast and Facebook. From all the 101 East team, thanks for watching.